And we're back. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Bardcast. I am Chris. I play Coriakin, and with me, as always, of course, is
Semi, and I play as Bingro.
Fantastic. And today, we're going to be talking about some recent pieces we've written, as well as talking about, I guess you'd call it musical ethics. Bingro, do you want to explain things?
We'll be talking about a very old song of yours, which is called Crunch, and you have a pretty, I'd say, difficult relationship to that song especially. As far as I understood, that is because you more or less took your inspiration or a lot of inspiration from another song you learned as a student while learning the piano, right?
Yeah, basically everything you said is correct. When I was starting out, I do what almost every musician does, which is to, the Beatles started as a cover band. Everyone starts by basically copying pieces, changing them a bit, and either doing them verbatim or doing them slightly differently. I really recommend that for people just starting out because it's a great way for people to learn the interface, to learn how to use the tools, and that still applies whether you're using Clownlord Tune Helper, whether you're using a digital audio workstation. The problem, of course, is I always joke that I listen to music with the ears of a kleptomaniac, and I think every composer should do that, but I mean, when does the joke go too far?
Yeah, that was something I was actually thinking about. I think we can call out the song that you wrote back then. It's Crunch. And I was wondering, because we're always joking about you stealing other composers' music, and I was wondering how come that you have this huge problem with Crunch while having rewritten a whole suite of mine and reusing all of my music. Is it due to you feel like you don't know the composer of the original Crunch, or is it because you know that I would be very appreciative of what you do to my music? Or that was the musical ethics question I was thinking about. How much stealing is too much, and why is it too much for you, especially with one song, while you're doing it to other songs? Do you know where I want to go?
I know exactly what you're talking about, and you're asking a very, very complicated question. I think my answer to that question would be a combination of intent and also attribution. And by attribution, I mean giving credit. So when I was starting out, I assumed that Clownlord was this tiny little game that nobody would ever notice, or it didn't really matter what I did. So, and especially since I was starting out, I was very insecure about my own music. So there are a couple of pieces where I basically took melodies from other places, left them mostly unchanged, and just used them and said, hey, I wrote this. Examples would be Electric Clay, which was originally basically a transcription of a synthwave piece by my friend Mark Sumner. Similarly, exact same thing to Stellar Winds, and also, oh my gosh, I've forgotten the name of that Symphonics tune, Shores of Destiny. He wrote some really, really great stuff. He was actually my inspiration as a kid. I didn't think he'd ever hear about or play Clownlord, so I'm like, I want to share this music with people. I'll just say that Coriakin wrote it in the game. Nowadays, I have a much more, I guess you'd say, mature relationship with my creativity, with my limitations, and with what music is supposed to be, at least in my mind. So I understand where young Corey was coming from about this, but I also think that it was a mistake. I mean, it helped me grow to who I am today, so it's possible that if I was in the same situation, I would do the same thing. But at this point, the way I feel about music is I am delighted to take people's melodies, change them, twist them around, do whatever I want with them, as long as I'm very clear that they're the one who wrote this and that I am doing this as an arrangement of an existing piece of music. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. But that also means that maybe this podcast today can be some kind of a therapy session for you. You give proper credit, You say who wrote the who was your inspiration writing that, and then you can move on.
I'll do my best.
That sounded not too hopeful.
I'll take some. It'll take some convincing. I won't say no right off the bat, but it'll take some convincing. All right, shall we get into it?
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we
Okay.
should.
Well, so the piece that Bingro asked me to write an arrangement of or to update, in the way that I've updated some of my other pieces, such as Dawn of Morning, was called Crunch, which I originally wrote back in the day. I thought it had some like a cool jazzy vibe, and I mean, to me back in the day, Crunch was super cool. He was this like super strong fighter, so I'm like, I'll name it after him. And it sounded like this. Now, I don't really play that very much these days. I have to admit, there are aspects to that that I really enjoy, and looking back at it as something that young Coriakin wrote, I can see how it helped me grow in certain ways. Like, again, as a piano player, I've been playing piano for like 8 years at that point, something like that, maybe 10. And but I'd grown up in the classical world, and that was the first jazzy sort of piece of music that I'd ever really encountered, and it blew my mind. At this point, I consider myself more of a jazz pianist than a classical pianist, and this got me started. But listening to this, I can see how there were times in it. Sorry, let me go back before I go on. The piece that I'm talking about is actually a piece. So in Canada, there's a probably other places around the Commonwealth. There's a sort of graded system for teaching piano called the Royal Conservatory of Music, and this was a piece that I encountered through there. It's by Christopher Norton. The piece is entitled "In a Hurry." Maybe we'll see if we can stick a link to it in the description or something. I don't really want to play it here because of copyright issues. But I love this piece so much. So at some level, I did what even current Coriakin does, which is, ooh, I love this music. Let's make it mine too. And I can hear I didn't actually use the quote unquote main melody from there. I used the main riff, and I used the transition at the end of each verse, whatever you'd want to call it, section. The actual melody I wrote is different, and I can see where I was going with, but even today, I still feel like the amount I changed it isn't enough to make me feel ownership over what I did, if that makes sense.
Hmm. I mean, that's a very personal thing. If you don't feel like that's enough, then nobody can dispute that. I think there's nothing anybody can say against that, but maybe you can see it as you start doing already as a first step on the way of Coriakin to becoming who he is today. And I think you kept the theme. You still steal others' music, and that's part of the joke, mostly. And
Yeah.
that was the early stages. And I guess the original composer, is he still alive? I don't know. If he isn't, we can't ask him if he would be fine with that. In the end, it gives his music another stage that he couldn't have dreamed of, another
Mm-hmm.
interpretation. And you and myself, we both like to hear different interpretations of our own music.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he would too.
So I suspect that if I had just reached out and asked, it probably would have been fine. If the issue is to take it, give no attribution, and then say that you wrote it, which is a major issue for copyright legal things. But also just like I mean, if you want to get into like a real nest of worms, we can extrapolate from this to say like does rap deserve to exist? Because so much of early hip hop is based off of stealing parts of recordings and not paying for it, not attributing it. But at the same time, if they didn't do that, that entire genre of music and everything that grew out of it wouldn't exist. So I don't think it's I don't think it's a dilemma that we can solve here. And the decision that I came to is to accept this as something I did, not be particularly proud of it, and just try not to, try and focus my energy into places I'm more proud of. So it's possible I'll go back to these things and do revisions later. But you might have actually noticed, back in 2002, sometime around then, I decided to play Musicologist and did a compilation of like 50 of my earliest tunes with basically for new composers. I broke it down with chord progressions. I explained what I was doing. I mean, it's all in Clanlord tune formats. You need mTooth or Clanlord Tune Hopper or the Java client to play it. But in there, I actually did attribute some of these things to the actual performers or to the actual original composers. So I felt a little bit good about that. But still, at this point, I still have a very fraught relationship with these pieces, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then before we go into the music, one last maybe story,
sure,
and maybe one last good thing that came out of Crunch. Crunch was one of the very first songs I heard when I was getting into Arendal and the Bard things that were way smaller than here in Clanlord and Puddleby, but there were a few bards, and at some point I also joined them, but the music, I played one of the songs last time at the last concert in December, but that was more or less the creme de la creme, and the other music was way less complex. I mean, you know what I'm writing today, and that is way above everything that I wrote back then, because I think I was 14 to 16, something like that. I wasn't even finished with school, so there wasn't too much I had to build on. That came later with my musicology studies. But I was already interested, and one of those sparks that made me interested was Crunch, along with a few things by Rakshasa. I think Seppel joined us in Arlon for a few times. So those were my starting points, and Crunch was a part of that.
Oh, that's awesome.
So maybe it's partially, we're sitting here today because you stole that song.
Well, you know what? I'm really, really happy that happened, actually. I'm really glad that I was able to help you get started, because I love your music nowadays. So just from a purely selfish point of view, I'm really glad I wrote this song, if it means that I get to hear your stuff now. So, and again, this is one of the reasons why I don't just sort of like try and pretend the song doesn't exist, because, again, this was something that was a part of me growing up, and apparently it was a part of your growing up too, and that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So,
all right. Music.
Moving on. Right, so now that we've talked about Crunch, let's get into the actual pieces, because the reason that this came up was that you asked me to do a rearrangement of Crunch, and I didn't want to, so I was actually stuck on it for quite a while, trying to figure out how I could do this, and then while I was trying to figure out how to make it more original, I thought, what if I go in exactly the opposite direction? What if I steal more? I mean, there's this joke from the science world that if you copy from one person, it's plagiarism, but if you copy from 6 people, it's research. So I don't know if it counts for 2 people, but I like that. Anyway, so I was also thinking about how I could make this a gift to you in particular, and then I was had remembered during that very first Bardcast recording, you'd shown me this metal trio that you'd written that was currently unfinished. It was an idea that you started but were feeling stuck on. So I thought, what if I try to combine that with that to make it work? I could take the individual themes from Crunch, try and use them in more original ways, and then, again, just trying to take the parts of Crunch that I liked, and then try and do a more modern-day Cory version of it. So I'm not going to play the original trio because we have that back in the first episode, which everyone can go back to and listen to. I'm sure they've got it memorized at this point, of course. But now that you've heard Crunch, take a listen to this.
That's so good.
Oh, it was fun to write. It was really, really fun. So just a little bit about how my composing idea for this. I really had the idea of writing 70-80% trio with the rest being Crunch. I don't know if that was my original intention from the very beginning, but as soon as I started writing, it really developed to feel like it wanted to be that way. I really enjoyed listening to that trio back during our very first recording session and was excitedly waiting for it to become a real piece. And then, I could be patient, but I can also be impatient. So I thought you had some really, really good ideas in there, and I felt like I was going back through my notes in there, and I just felt like you transitioned between them too quickly, so I felt like they just needed a bit more time to be developed. And I don't mean you need to sit down and spend more time developing. I just mean they need to be doubled in length or something so they have more time to resonate with the audience and stuff like that. So going through the piece stage by stage, in my head, I was still thinking about this as what is he going to think the first time he listens to this? So, of course, I have to start with just crunch. And then as soon as you get into this, you're like, wait a second, come on. So, I mean, again, this is all very, very familiar to anyone who knows the original idea. But the part that I put in there was I have this sneaky little bass note in the bottom just to add a little bit of rhythmic interest. That's low C, I believe. And then we're building up the texture slowly, just the way you did in the original recording. But this is where I start throwing in little quotes from Crunch. I can totally understand why you viewed this as unsatisfying as an arrangement of Crunch, because it's really an arrangement of your original trio with little bits of Crunch stapled on the outside, or like painted on like icing on a cake. But as soon as I started doing that, it was just so much fun I couldn't help myself.
This sounds like I would be completely against anything you did, which is not the case.
I know.
I appreciate everything about this song. I do understand your relationship to Crunch and how it was difficult for you, but I still like what you did very much.
And I appreciate that.
I don't want to have that portrayed any differently.
Okay. I totally understand. However, it's, as someone who makes playing with the listener's expectations a big part of how I think about music, I totally understand expecting something and not getting it, and being like, this is cool, but it's not what I wanted, or what I was expecting. And again, especially if you do hear something you're not expecting, it can take a while to get used to it and to appreciate it. Like, it's actually an ongoing and serious issue. Like when musicians release a new album that's very different than something they've done in the past, oftentimes like audience members, their listeners don't like it because it's different. It's not what they're expecting. And then over time, people come to appreciate it. But it's that initial rush of, wait, what's going on? So anyway, moving on. This section continues. Right, so I was trying to alternate it between quotes from Crunch and also more original things. Ba-da-ba-da, like there. Going, and then at the end. And again, another quote from Crunch. The next part is just, again, we're going through sections of yours. I decided actually after this part, I think for this one, the first time through I played it unmodified. The second time, I don't know if you can hear in the back there, but the guitar is quoting Crunch again.
Mm-hmm.
And there it is again. And then again, just because I thought you had these cool ideas, go back to the first section again. This time through, basically unchanged from the first time through because of space concerns. Although here's where I have the original quote from Crunch, but then it's doubled and faster. So again, it's just lots and lots of piling the same thing on top of each other, which is fun. Mm-hmm. This section again, mostly unchanged. And then we get into the sort of chorus part. Apart from the quote from Crunch, this actually has the part that I'm second most proud of in the whole piece. And again, it's one of those things that came about by accident. This little tiny upward line here. Right here. I was just trying to think of an upward line, and I couldn't come up with anything that worked until just randomly I came up with... it's C, D, G, D. So it's a sort of like C minor with a D instead of an E minor thing. But then I go from that to E flat, A flat, and then down to the G. It's basically doing this upward line, but then doing the same thing, slightly offset, but a semitone up. I think it just adds this really cool part. It just adds this really cool feel to it. I know I'm like over like focusing on like a half a second of the piece, but I really love it. What can I do?
Yeah, I mean, that's if that is what made you like the song and feel like this makes it a bit more special than before. I think those are the parts we should have an eye on.
Yeah.
I think that's important. I think that's one of the great things about this podcast. We can look at whatever made us like specific things while writing or listening to songs.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Anyway, I don't want to go through this. No, actually, I really do want to go through this whole piece step by step, but I won't. So we continue through this part, which in my head I consider the chorus, although I'm sure it wasn't originally. And this section was really interesting in your original idea because it sounds similar to the beginning, but it's substantially different. So I was trying to think about if there's a way I could connect it more to that initial section. So what I did was to try to respect this more open texture you have, where you don't have that fast-paced guitar line going, but use the same interjections from the Torjo that I had in the first part. Especially when we get to the second part where it speeds up a bit. So the Torjo is basically unchanged. It's the guitar part that's different. Speaking technically, this also helps get around the length requirements. When you have sections that are basically the same, it means you can have a longer piece without it going crazy, or without it being so long it can't be played in Clownlord. Anyway, just for the last part, we go back to that chorus again, which again is almost unchanged except for this upward line, which has this high part up at the top, just the high C's. And this is the sort of thing I love to add to arrangements, where we're still respecting your original intent in terms of the melody, but it adds a little bit of like one extra thing happening in a sonic range where there wasn't much happening. Originally, there wasn't much happening in the high register, so I figured that's where I could put something.
That is because I wanted to write a melody for that, and I didn't. Yet.
Well, you remember my favorite word, yet. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway,
that's why it was still unfinished.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And again,
apart from transitions and stuff.
Well, I'm glad that I recognized your intent. That's happy. That's good for me. Okay. At the end of this part, it goes into an entirely different section, and this is where I started to get a bit more creative, I'd say. Where I was like, okay, I have this.
And this is the part where I feel like this is the best part.
Well, exactly. And if I were to actually properly do a revision of Crunch at this point, I was going to talk about this at the end, but what I would do is I think I would actually basically rewrite it with some of the original melodies, but really focus on the themes and ideas that I'm getting to in this last part. So what's going to happen here is I was thinking, how can I have a contrast from this very fast-paced part? Block chords, straightforward, like chunky, slow down the momentum. But then I was thinking, oh, well, it's too slow if it's that, or if it's too boring if it's just that. What if I alternate that with that initial riff, the guitar riff that I loved so much, which hadn't been brought back yet in your idea? So we have this now. And this is where I really feel like sort of we're alternating my ideas and your ideas in much less of that 70-30 split, more just like 50-50. And then this last part is definitely my favorite part too. So this last part was, I would say, inspired by Crunch and inspired by your trio, but this is probably the most original part as far as something I wrote here. Before I get into that last part, though, just one last comment about this. This second to last part right here was originally supposed to be like a drum solo, drum feature part. And that still comes through to some extent, but there's so much else going on now it's hard to tell. Anyway, after that crazy drum solo, I knew I wanted to have like straight up drums, just fast, like straight rock beat or whatever. And the melody, like the top notes and the rhythm and the chords are all inspired by crunch and inspired by your piece, but again, it's all just new stuff. It's sort of like I'm taking like individual notes of that crunch motif and stretching it out into this. And of course, you have to end with like the bookends where it's like end the way you started with just crunch. So anyway, in general, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. I was really, really stuck on doing anything else with crunch, so I'm glad that I did what I did. It's possible I'll come back to it and revise it sometime, but I'm pretty happy with it the way it is.
I am too.
Cool. So I played that to you, and I'm sure you enjoyed it, but it wasn't quite what you were hoping. So you actually came back to me with a surprise not that long later. Can you tell me what happened next?
I think you phrased it correctly. I wasn't disappointed, but I was expecting something else. Mm-hmm. And initially I was hoping for something in a new style, a bit more complex harmonies than the old crunch, new ways to interpret the material at hand. And I already said that I appreciate the song as it is now. And I always feel honored to be a part of a Coriakin song. And I understand why you hesitate to have more crunch in this song. Mm-hmm. But I felt I was robbed of an opportunity to have this crunch, which has a history for me, as I already explained, in new clothes, basically. Mm-hmm. That made me think, and after you took my music and mixes it with yours, I felt like I can do the same. And I went into the direction of there's this, I think it's a US thing. I don't know if they say that in where you live too. But what would Cory do was more or less the guideline that I was working with. So I really was thinking, if Coriakin had a good relationship with crunch, what would he have been doing when he wrote that song? That was what I had in my mind. And after you already picked my metal trio, it was pretty clear that I had to go down that road. And between the first episode of the Bardcast and the time of writing, I've been doing a lot of research. I've been looking into how do drums work for in metal, how do power chords work and stuff. So I felt more comfortable trying to get into this metal themed stuff. Mm-hmm. And when I started with the crunch variation, it basically came all together. You said that it was one of the first songs you dealt with in terms of jazz, mm-hmm. which is the foundation of rock and metal. Mm-hmm. And I felt that helped a lot, because what I did is I took what you had written, or what Norton, I think was his name.
Yeah, Christopher Norton, yes.
And basically just had to add the components of metal. That was all. So everything was there, and I just had to make it more metal style and mix my stuff into it, and then we got where we are now. So that was pretty interesting and surprisingly easy.
That's really interesting, because when I was growing up, had basically no relationship with metal music. I wasn't into it at all. I never even thought of this piece as being anywhere close to metal, but what you did fits perfectly. So one of my favorite parts of music is when someone writes something that I never would have, just something totally different than I could have possibly thought of. And your way of taking this piece was delightful to me for exactly that reason.
I'm happy it turned out that way. I wanted it to be a surprise.
Oh, it was.
After I finished it, I knew I couldn't attend the next concert. And I was thinking about waiting until the next concert when we see each other to show it to you. But I couldn't wait. That was another 1.5 months to go, and I didn't want to wait that long. So I sent it to you. And I remember pretty clearly you didn't answer for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh.
And I was thinking, oh, did I go too far? What is wrong?
Yeah, no, sorry. For anyone who doesn't know, I work as an elementary school music teacher, which is a lovely job in many ways, but it is incredibly tiring. And often I get home and I just need silence and I don't listen to anything. So my apologies. So it was worth waiting for.
No worries. Turned out to be fine. Yeah, but that was how that song actually came to life. That's mainly the story behind the song.
Cool.
Maybe before we go into the music itself or into the details of the music, we should maybe listen to it.
Oh, absolutely. All right.
Or do you have any thoughts before we go to that?
I mean, I have a very important thought, which is, what is the title of this piece?
Oh, the story of the title. As I said, I wanted it to be a surprise for you. And also there's another surprise hidden within the song, and I didn't want to spoil that as well. I start the song by using this riff that you used as an intro as well in your new version of Crunch. And I told you when I sent you the song, I finished my Met trio. So I didn't tell you about Crunch right away, so I wanted you to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, what title can I give the song that doesn't give too much away in terms of Crunch and in terms of the other thing that we're going into later. And I just thought, yeah, I'll just give it a name that I find to be fitting and translate it to German. So you don't understand German as far as I know?
Not very well at all.
And so that was my working title, kind of. And after a while, I started thinking, okay, what can I call it actually? What's a good name for that? And you convinced me to just keep the German name.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
I have to explain it every single time, but we can do that now. And then it's called Knusprige Ente, which is German for crunchy duck. And I had some variations of that in mind, just like crunchy duck with noodles or something like that. But I just felt like crunchy duck is fine.
I like it the way it is. All right, here we go. I like that one. Yeah, I like what you've done here. It's very much like whereas I was taking your trio and stapling crunch to it, you were very much sort of taking your like the sort of feel of your trio, but this is very much an arrangement of crunch.
Yeah, and I couldn't care less if I copied your song or someone else's song. That was none of my concern.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to do crunch
Yeah.
without claiming any ownership of the original. But I liked the idea of doing the opposite of what you have been doing. You said you had 70% metal trio, 30% crunch, and I thought doing the same but the other way around could be a lot of fun. And as I said, crunch was perfect for that. And now that we've heard it, we can maybe dive into it a little bit deeper.
Sure.
Because part of the fun was to surprise you. So I started with the metal trio, which you already knew. This intro riff is heavily inspired by another piece, which is called "Awakened Alive" by Skillet, which is a band from Memphis in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if any of the audience maybe knows the band. I like them very much. It's a softer metal band. It's white metal, but I like I've been listening to them for years, and I always liked their intro for "Awakened Alive," and that was the origin of the metal trio as we had it in the first episode. And I continue by building the song the same way I did in the original trio, but then I came up with a surprise of adding the crunch bass line. That was the first time where I said, okay, now I'm doing something different. Now this is the moment for the surprise. Mm-hmm. The second surprise is shortly after that. One element of metal music or rock music are power chords. Power chords are basically you take a note and you add the fifth without the third, so you don't have a full chord, but only the bass, the root note and the fifth. Which
so can I jump in for just a second?
Sure.
So you're talking about this part, right?
Yeah.
And then the power chord.
And then the pulse.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So that was the moment where I wanted to establish we're really going into this rock metal theme. And then I wanted to make that even more clear by adding the drums. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we are full head into metal at that point. Yeah, but other than that, it's basically crunch metalified. I didn't change change too much regarding structure, regarding melody. It's mainly just I took the parts that were there and thought, how can I make them more metally? And how can I add things here and there to keep the listener interested in what I'm doing? Because, I mean, crunch is a very old song. Everybody has heard it for a few times already. So I knew I had to do a few things differently. And one thing was, of course, I had my own trio, my own music woven into that. But also there were a few other things that I did.
Well, to interrupt, what I thought was really cool was, again, I'd never even thought of crunch as anything approaching metal. And then the way that you basically took the original piece and did that with it worked out really well. So when you were talking about adding the drums, and then the melody on top, sort of around here, adding that riff at the bottom really just made it feel totally like metal with the drums as well. Again, I would never have thought of that, but it worked perfectly.
Yeah, and the only thing I added on top of that for the first run, for the first part, was a little bit of rhythm guitar, mm-hmm. Which I dropped after the first thing. That's only something that is happening within the first run through.
Yeah, is that this part here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually really like that, and the way it interplays with the bottom part of the torso. Can I emphasize just that? It would be like this. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else can really just hear the guitar interweaving with the torso part there, but I don't know, it sounds really sick to me.
Yeah, by all means, I'm not a professional metal music composer. That was mainly what I was gathering through a few months of research, watching videos on YouTube and stuff.
I mean, you're going to get there soon, but the end of each section, the part that you added, I think is really, really cool. I'd love if we can skip ahead to that at some point.
Sure, let's go.
So it's this part. Oh, what a transition. It leads back to that main riff. How did you come up with that?
That was another way of surprising and doing things differently, and also stretching the song a little bit. Crunch is pretty short, and I wanted to give it a bit more space, and repeating those sections and making it some kind of a sequence helped doing that. Having a fully completed song that I rip off makes a few things very easy. I don't have to think too much harmonically, so there isn't a lot going on. The harmonics are there. I don't have to come up with anything else, but I wanted to have a few original things harmonically. I like playing with harmonies, and I like shifting things around and end up somewhere else. And that's a little bit of that Bingro stuff that I felt had to be in there at some point in some way. And having those sequences upwards or downwards helped a bit, being a little bit more original and not only ripping off someone else's music. Kind of like your last part of your crunch version.
Yeah. And again, like your choices there, because the original mainly just goes back and forth between get into technicalities, like the minor 1 chord, D minor, to a G major chord, minor 1 to major 4, is a really neat progression in my mind, and it mainly just goes back and forth between there until it gets to the 5, just like at that very last transition back to the beginning in the original piece and also in the original piano piece. But your way of taking this on like a journey where we're going to some interesting new places really is quite satisfying, because again, like what I was talking before about setting up expectations, sometimes when you don't give people what they're expecting, it can be dissatisfying because they're like, oh, I was expecting this and I got that, and then they'll eventually grow to love it. But in this case, you've set up the expectations, or the original piece has set up the expectations by going back and forth between these 2 chords over and over again to the point where it's almost getting boring. So adding a bit of interest is exactly what you want, and taking it a whole different direction, because at this point I know that you're doing an arrangement of this. Now you're playing with my expectations in a way that I'm fully prepared for and absolutely love. So again, like, just think about it philosophically. It works so perfectly.
And I'm not done yet with surprises.
Oh, okay, carry on.
Yeah, but I mean, we come back to the usual crunch stuff. I already told you I got rid of the guitar, of the rhythm guitar, and I had the intro riff woven into the second part, just to make things a bit different, to show a little bit more of those 30% metal trio, but not too much else has been changed there.
So you're talking about how, like, the first time it was this?
The beat rhythm below?
Yeah, and then the second time it's, let's see if I can get the right spot, it's this. Yeah, and again, like, just due to the nature of the instruments, the guitar is a bit quieter than the torso, but it does add a lot of interest, changing the texture there. I like it.
Yeah, that was the second run, and then I got a bit crazy. Since it kind of was already this tribute to how I got into music in Orendal or Clanlord. I felt like it could be also appropriate to add a little bit of somebody else's music into that. And I've always been thinking about adding Rakshasa's duck song somewhere, somehow. And I couldn't figure out how to do that. And after I realized my intro riff and the duck song intro have an overlapping motif, so to speak, or partially motif. That was my Frankenstein moment where I started giggling and having fun to put all those things together. That was where I fully feel how you have felt during your writing process. That was my moment.
That's fantastic. So I love to play it. So you're talking about this part, I believe. And again, if you can't hear it, it's... which is one of the main melodies from the duck, and it's just hiding there in the guitar if you're paying attention to it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and that is the crunchy duck.
Indeed. And I loved, because, again, you actually got exactly the effect you were intending on my first listen through, because I was cracking up. I'm like, oh my gosh, what has he done? And then at this point, I'm like, there's something going on, but I don't know what it is. Like, it was hiding there, and I couldn't recognize it on the first listen through. So then, of course, I go on Google and translate your title, and I'm like, oh, yep, there it is. There we go.
Everything worked out as intended.
It did. Oh my gosh.
No, that was very much the idea. This song had or should have been, and was in the end, a surprise for you, and in some regards also to everyone else. And everyone knows the duck song who has been around for at least 1 year in Clanlord and has paid some attention to the bards. So everybody knows this, but still it seems to be very, very subtle that the duck song is also in there in this song. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the song already got to Rakshasa somehow, but I would love to have his thoughts as well.
Well, we'll find out at some point.
I hope so.
Yeah. So one of the things that I just want to mention about what you said is, like, this piece was designed for me to be listen to it originally and then joke, and like it was. I mean, it's not a joke of a piece, but there are parts that are intended to be like surprising and humorous and stuff like that. But I think I've talked about this before in a previous episode about the contrast between like immediate appeal and lasting appeal. Mm-hmm. So like humor is really good the first time, and the effect drops off really quickly because surprise is such an important part of humor. So a piece like this lives and dies not only on does it accomplish its goal on the first listen through, but are there things hiding there that people can appreciate on further like subsequent listenings. And this piece succeeds partly because of stuff like that. Like every time I listen to it now, I'm like, can I hear the duck part this time? Am I going to miss it? Oh, there it is. Wait, I lost it. Okay, there it is again. And I think about it sort of like writing a book, or reading a book, like, or watching a movie, especially a mystery where you see it the first time through, and then you get the solution to the mystery at the end, and then you watch it the second time through, and you can catch all the different hints. So same piece of media, but your experience of appreciating it is different. And I think it's really cool when you or me or someone can write a piece of music that does that successfully. So good job.
Yeah, and I love music that hides ideas. I'm a huge fan of Bach. So the real Bach, not his children. He has quite a few sons who.
There's 18 of them or whatever.
Yeah, he likes to do that too. I'm currently with my choir. We're working on the Mass in B minor, which is a huge work for vocals and orchestra.
Of course, yes.
And I don't know how familiar you are with masses and structures of musical masses. But
reasonably familiar.
In the Crucifixus, there's the very beginning. Bach has this so-called cross motif, where he paints a cross with notes. So he has.
So for listeners, it literally looks like if you draw a line between the notes, a cross on the actual sheet music.
Yes, that is one of the things that you cannot hear. You have to look into the notes to actually get it. And for the Crucifixus, in his Mass in B minor, he does the very same, but with the voices. So you have the voices start at different points, painting that cross motif.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And those are the things I like. When I see them, I know this is 100% on purpose. This was a genius, and he did this on purpose. And I love those things. And I try to do them kind of in my music, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But the sad thing about it is you can't hear it. If you don't know it's there, nobody knows what a genius I am.
Well, that's what the podcast is for. Oh man. Oh no, I totally agree. One of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of most quote unquote modern music is that they some of the composers focus too much on that to the exclusion of the fundamentals of music, because music is supposed to be listened to, not just analyzed. But on the other hand, like, it's kind of fun to have an in-joke, to be like, this is just for the musicians, this is just for other composers, this is for someone who looks at the music, who cares, who dives in, and for someone who gets it. And again, like we're talking about with this podcast, hopefully we get a chance to open the door to some of these so that, people who haven't had a chance to go to school for years about music can appreciate some of this stuff too. So, anyway. I really appreciate this piece. Thank you so much. It was really, really fun to listen to, and again, totally unexpected that you would. I know you didn't intend this, but there was this little bit of me who heard you going like, "Oh, that's what you did? Let me show you how it's done, kid."
It was more like, I hear what you did. This is how I would have wanted it to be.
That's a much more diplomatic way of putting it. I like that. Oh man, you know what? I have enjoyed talking about these so much. I think maybe we should, on a future podcast, talk about how to do arrangements in general. Just sort of like, because of course I've done a million of these. Rakshas has done a million of these, or at least, and there are some like tips and tricks that make it a little bit more straightforward, or not quite so daunting to take another person's piece of music and make it your own. Plus, I think it's important to talk about how to do it in a way that's respectful and legal, as opposed to just straight up ripping something off. Oh well. Unfortunately, at the end, I don't think you've accomplished your goal. I do appreciate why I wrote Crunch in the past, and I'm glad that I've progressed past it. It's still not going to be one of my favorite pieces, although I have to admit I'm really, really gratified that it was such a formative piece for you.
Yes, and to me, even though you might not feel comfortable playing it too much, I still feel like there has been quite a few good things coming out of it that you didn't see coming when you first thought about, okay, maybe that wasn't too cool to do that. But in the end, some more music came out of it. We had a lot of fun. We have this podcast where we talk about it, and we gave proper credit. And I think overall, we did what we could do in hindsight.
Yep. And if I come back to it, I can finally fix all the parts that annoy me. Like, why did I go to B natural and C up at the top? It just sounds so weird every time.
And I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, I'll add it to my list of things to do, but I got to warn you, it's not that high right now. Well, unless you have anything else to say, I guess that kind of wraps it up for now.
I think we're good.
Well, once again, I have been Chris, playing Coriakin.
And I'm Sammy, and I play as Bingro.
thank you for listening to us, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye.